Welcome to the Diary of an African Autism Supermom.
I got my diagnosis on the 28th of January 2026, and I took a couple of tests to find out finally and confirm that I do have ADHD, which was such a relief because finally I got the answer of why I thought that something was wrong with me all my life. And I'm glad because I wouldn't have found out if it wasn't because of my kid's diagnosis. I think in pursuit of understanding what autism is and how it affected my life and why is in my life as well, that led me to finding out that actually I'm also on the spectrum of ADHD. ADHD and autism are both neurological disorders, but then for me with ADHD, I'm mostly affected by planning, organizing, emotional dysregulation. There's a whole lot of things. If I were to make a list, we won't be done because, like, lately, every time I come across a video of somebody who's ADHD and they explain something, if there's something new that I see that I forgot, I keep writing it out. So lately I'm like writing all the things, and anyways, for me to get to know, to understand how my brain works. But anyway, going back to what I was saying, autism affects a person who's autistic in areas of communication. You can see they've got repetitive behavioral patterns. They have social anxiety. There's a whole lot of list with regards to that. But with ADHD, for me, it was the ability to regulate my emotions, things like task paralysis, where you can't do certain things because your brain switches off. And there's a whole lot of things. I don't have them at the top of my head because I'm still learning about some of the things. And I guess maybe even though I got diagnosed in January, it took me 6 months to finally say, okay, fine, Lerato, you have been diagnosed. Let's get into ADHD. Let's learn about it. Let's learn what it is. Let's learn how your brain functions so that you can start living with it, living your life with understanding that your brain works in a different way. And, people, I've noticed in my circle, I'll tell people that, I got diagnosed with ADHD, and the immediate response is all of us, all of us, we have a bit of ADHD. And I think that's a little bit dismissive because I struggled with this since I was a child. There was a time when Kito used to cry over everything, like she was highly empathetic. And at the time, I got a little bit annoyed because I could see myself in her, and it took me time to say, okay, you know what, Kito's autistic. She's very highly sensitive. She does not want to see anyone crying. If there's nobody crying next to Kitu, Kitu will be crying with them. And that's actually how I was when I was a child. I cried over everything, whereby I was, bullied. I was called crybaby, mama tepe, selalani, owokowa, weak, like too sensitive. Like I had that all the way to the time I started working, even in my corporate era days. I used to have the same problem where I would burst into tears, and people around me would look at me weird, like there was something wrong with me, up until I could no longer work anymore because of social anxiety. And it's a long story. I'll make another video and talk about the symptoms that I had since I was a child until now. Getting my diagnosis put meaning to my life. Suddenly I was able to go back to my life and look at certain area or certain events and understand that this happened this way because of 1, 2, 3. And I must say it gives me so much peace because I grew up thinking and knowing that something was not okay with me. That I remember when I met my husband, when he wanted to, he was serious. When he met me, he just wanted to marry me. He knew that I'm gonna marry him. And the thing that I told him was, I'm not sure what's wrong with me. I don't promise that I'll be okay. I really want to get to this journey. And this was 20 years ago. I want to get into this journey to finding out what's wrong with me. And I think that's why I even started studying psychology, because I was hoping if I do psychology, I'll find out what's wrong with my brain or with my personality. And I didn't get the answers. And I think also for me personally, that's why I also went into the faith that I was in, because I thought maybe if I get myself into the faith system, I'll find out, maybe something will help me, miraculous healing and stuff. But it's only this year, 2026, when I decided that I'm going to remove every other thing in my life because I really want to find out what's wrong with me. And I think it came at a perfect time because, you know, when you're in your 40s, I'm in my mid 40s, perimenopause stepped in, and I could not mask anything anymore. I could not pretend. Like, the ability for me to mask was just reduced tremendously, whereby the real me came out. And when I got diagnosed, I was so relieved. Finally, I know what's happening. I think most of us as autism moms, we give birth to kids who are on the spectrum. And it's not necessarily that we are also on the spectrum, but you find that in our family, like I found out that my great-grandmother was an autism mom. I found out that her son, who was my grandfather's youngest son, has been autistic all this time, and none of us knew because during his time, black people could not be diagnosed with autism. So I only found out recently before he died. He died like a few weeks ago, actually last month. Yeah, he died last month, and I was so relieved because I got to learn that actually in my family there's a trace of neurodevelopmental disorders, and it's okay. That was also one thing that actually helped me to accept that my kids are autistic. I'm thankful, honestly. I feel like I'm now beginning to live my life. When I get out of the house, I go to the mall or wherever, go shopping, I'm aware of the sensory overload, or the things that used to irritate me or hurt me, the things that I used to observe that I feel like, you know, for instance, I'd give way to someone and then they look at me like, you know, and that is something small, but for me, it'd be like, what did I do? Why did I? And it would be like a monologue that would go on for days, and something else called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, where when you get rejected, it becomes an intense pain that lasts for days. Like, I don't want to lie, I feel so relieved. I feel so relieved because today I know that I got 3 kids who are autistic because there's autism in my family, and I am also on the ADHD spectrum, and it's okay. According to the diagnostic results from my psychologist, she was saying that, you know, I indicate a long-standing pattern of attentional and executive functioning difficulties, emotional dysregulation, and interpersonal sensitivity, with onset in childhood and clinically significant impairment across occupational, societal, and daily functioning demands. And that's actually what was happening. This thing, which I did not know was ADHD, affected all other spheres of my life, in terms of getting a job and being able to keep it, in terms of having friends or relationships that you can actually keep. I haven't had friends for a very long time, and I used to worry that why can't I? But I actually realized why. With ADHD, it's a different ball game. Daily functioning, you know, things like repetitive chores, you get to a point where your brain can't, like, it just can't do this. But I'll explain more in the next video about my symptoms, and I don't have answers on how to deal with it because I'm also learning. And remember, even though I got diagnosed with ADHD, I also have major depressive disorder, which I'm taking medication for. And I think most of us will get to a point where you are depressed, you are stressed, and you get diagnosed with anxiety, but you're anxious and depressed because of you don't understand what's happening with your life. For me, it was the best answer that I could have ever prayed for, because now I am self-aware. I understand how my kids behave. I mean, I'm not autistic. I only have ADHD, but I can understand where my kids are in terms of certain symptoms that it's autism. Their diagnosis led me here, where I finally, for the first time in my life, I understand why I am like this, and I'm working in power with my brain. I'm understanding how it works. It's a relief. I don't want to lie, I am so relieved. And I hope that if you're a mom like me, you've got autistic kids or autistic child, and you've been feeling like maybe you've got a little bit of autism or ADHD or ADD or something which is like mental, I don't know, something on the spectrum, get yourself checked, mommy, because being checked and finding out that you're probably on a spectrum as well, it's such a relief, because for me it reduced feelings of shame, of guilt, and it placed me in a position of control. Now I can control what enters into my life. I can filter through information because I know my brain is that of a neurodivergent, not of a neurotypical. So it brings so much clarity and peace. On the next episode, I want to talk about the symptoms that have been in my life since childhood, And I'm sure there's a lot more that I'm gonna learn as I'm learning on the day, but don't miss that video. And thanks again for joining me on this episode of the Diary of an African Autism Supermom. I'll see you on the next video. Thanks again. Bye.